Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. My name is Tammy Shamoon, and I am the co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. I'm a child psychologist and a mom to 3 amazing kids. And we're really excited today to have with us Lindsay Sealey. And we're going to talk all about the idea of Supergirl syndrome. If you love our podcast, please give us a rate and review on your nearest and dearest podcast provider platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps us so much. And please remember, if you want to hear this podcast that is ad-free and you want bonus content, so you get another 10 to 15 minutes of content, just go to Patreon, and we have the link in the descriptor of this podcast episode. So again, we have Lindsay with us today. She is an educator, academic strategist, best-selling author, dedicated to empowering girls through her work as the founder and CEO of Bold New Girls, an organization that supports social emotional learning and academic development. With a BA in English and psychology from Simon Fraser and an MA in educational leadership from San Diego State University, she brings over 15 years of experience in education, curriculum design, and youth coaching. Her books, including Growing Strong Girls, Rooted, Resilient, and Ready, Made for More, and Supergirl Syndrome, have won numerous accolades, such as the Eric Hoffer Medal, the Nautilus Book Award. Lindsay is a sought-after speaker, contributor to outlets like HuffPost and the Globe and Mail, known for addressing topics as confidence, perfectionism, and the mental health crisis in girls. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Okay. So I read your book this week, your newest book. I've read actually a couple of your other books. So your work is not new to me. We've had you at our summits and conferences in the past. So we're here to talk about this idea of Supergirl syndrome. And as I read this book, I was like, you described my childhood and even my adult womanhood. I was like, here we go. Like, let's talk about this. And it reminded me just so much. She was one of the founders of Facebook. She's the founder of Facebook, but she was Lean In. Sheryl Sandberg wrote Lean In. And it just brought back, like, there are a lot of connections there for me with Lean In and your book on this. And just like the standards that women have are not the same as men. But you're talking about kind of where it starts. So let's talk about how you define this idea of Supergirl syndrome.
Yeah. So first of all, I do want to give credit where credit is due. I heard this term and fell in love with it when I read, I believe it was the book Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein. And she's really well known for her speaking out on femininity and the patriarchy and culture and media representation and how that affects our girls, leading them to overachieve and to be multitaskers and to really focus on people pleasing and not so much on themselves or even emotional expression. So I heard this term and kind of just took it and ran with it. And how I would define it in maybe a simple way is it is this pressure or this responsibility that girls are feeling to be all things to all people all of the time. And that's essentially a boulder on their shoulders. And I don't know too many girls who are, free of that pressure that they feel. And whether the pressure comes from culture and society or it comes from family and friends or their community involvement, essentially that all gets internalized and that becomes the pressure that she puts on herself.
Yeah,
and
I know as a mom,
around, like
right.
It is what it is, right?
And I think there's probably a lot of mothers listening who feel that really deeply because I know, like, I love this quote in your book where it says, she's polished, pleasing, placating, performative, and perfect, but underneath she is exhausted because it feels like we're supposed to wear, as a woman, not when I was a kiddo, although it had to start there, right? It started somewhere. Of feeling like we have to be a good mom, we have to be an excellent psychologist, a business owner, a wife, like all of these pieces. And we have to do it really well and look like we're doing it with no effort. And so the question is, where the hell does this start?
That's it. So if it was just like be busy and do everything, that would be one thing. But it's like, no, do everything really well. And now the kicker is make it look like it's effortless.
And you have to look good. You have to look good and polished doing it.
Yeah. And don't look tired and don't look stressed and forget about your anxiety and your feelings and your real self. Like, it's insane pressure. And I think that I was able to put all these ideas together from personal experience. Of course, I feel that pressure and always have. But it's just the conversations that I have with girls, the little girls, the teen girls, the moms now. I work with young women, and it's like they're all saying the same thing. It's so much, and I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, and I've had enough. Like, it's too much. And that's when you often see the rise in mental health concerns or just procrastination. Just like, I'm done. Like, it's so much. I'm stopped from doing anything.
Okay. So where do you think, based on your research and your clinical work, like, where do you think this comes from? Like, I can tell you, for me, there were a lot of pressures, I think, obviously to do well for my parents. Like, there was like, you must achieve. That's a very German focus. I mean, in my culture, that was very much driven. But I also got the message, like, I had to learn how to cook and I had to look a certain way. Like, my brother never had that pressure. He was never told he couldn't wear certain things or, dress a certain, like, I don't ever remember conversations about my brother's body or like his weight or like, right? Or what he couldn't wear to school.
I don't think it comes from any one thing. I think that's the problem, is that it's multifaceted. So yes, it's culture and it's society and it's family and it's friends and it's our people and our peers and then ourselves. So it is, I see a lot of things in circles. It's like coming from all angles. But I think why we're maybe noticing it more, or there's this uptake, or why are girls so busy, so stressed, so overwhelmed, is definitely the overarching time that they're spending on their phones and social media.
Okay.
So it's like, I think of it really simply, like in my grade 2 classroom, there were 30 people that I had to look at and 30 people looking at me. So that felt like some pressure. I was like teacher's pet, like good at a lot of things. So I did feel like that pressure started early, but that's 30. Now there's the world. There are billions. And it's like, okay, that's a lot. And so it's everything, I feel, has just gotten magnified and intensified. And I think that's why it kind of seems like, why are suddenly girls so, pressured? I don't think it's suddenly. I think it's always been there. I just think it's magnified.
Yeah. So with the rise of things like Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, like, I mean, these girls are not on Facebook. That's archaic. I'm on Facebook, but
maybe some.
Right. There's some of these, even Instagram, most of them wouldn't be on, but they would be on other platforms. Is the idea that maybe it's like being on a stage and having to present yourself in such a way that you're perceived as likable. So all the likes they're counting. They're also looking at the filters, like, how do I look physically, which leads to likes, and maybe it's also staging, like, to show they're busy and that they're doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so what they see is a lot of girls looking good and performing and achieving and accomplishing and being quote unquote successful. How can they not want that too? And I don't think that's all bad, but I think that there is so much focus, and I speak about this in the book, of kind of keeping up this image. I call it the good girl persona. And that's one of the 8 pressures that I unpack. But it's looking good. It's saying the right thing. It's making the good choices. It's keeping up this idea of like, I am good and shiny and talented and all of the things that I'm quote unquote trained to be. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad, but I'm saying it's at the cost of her truest, most authentic self. So as girls are seeing all these perfect images and all of this success and the achievements and the accomplishments of other people and influencers and celebrities, they're trying to match it. But what they're doing is they're creating this perfect and polished self. And what they're not able to do is make mistakes, fail, show all of their feelings, share their secrets. There are the parts of them that are just less shiny, but so human. And so I feel like very early on, there's this disconnect. The self that I'm showing you, look how good I am, because I want attention, approval, and I want to keep up to everyone else. But this true self of who I really am just gets smaller and smaller. And my belief is this is the root cause of anxiety. Because I'm not allowed to be real, there's a disconnection and a separation. And so my real self gets smaller and smaller and more hidden, to the point that I don't really know who I am. I don't know that I can do things, and I don't trust myself. That's like the core problem, I would say.
Okay, with our girls that have this kind of Supergirl syndrome. So what I'm hearing is there's a lack of authenticity because they can't bring their true parts, the parts that are suffering, the parts that maybe are messy, the parts that are fit some kind of box that they maybe don't fit into. And they suppress that, and then they don't feel safe, they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard.
Yeah. And then the pressure, in that weird way, the pressure becomes greater because I have to keep up who you think I am. I have to keep up who I should be. But where is her true self? That's messy, silly, angry, frustrated, jealous. Like, this is just real. I think we will do girls such a service, and we can be so supportive by encouraging, I just call it her whole self, or the whole girl ideology. So I love when they succeed. I love when they're, putting time into their effort, or they're practicing self-care. All of that is great. And I love that they yell when they're mad, or that they show me they're frustrated, or they say, oh, I made a mistake. What do I do? Or I'm feeling stressed out or overwhelmed. Like, I like the raw goods, I call it. I like to see all of it and validate that as much as the easier qualities or ways of being, right? It's harder to have a conversation about envy or frustration or hurt or grieving than it is about, her joy, happiness, things that she's proud of, and how she's succeeding. I just think they're harder conversations and they take more time, but that's a nice balance.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think, I have boys and girls. So when I think of I want that message to also hit my boys, but boys don't struggle with this on average in the same way that girls do. So what's different? Why do girls take on all of this stress and all of this presentation and all of this social awareness and pressure, and we don't see it as much in boys? Boys do struggle, but in a different way. I think their struggles are there, but it's not in the way we're not talking about this sort of syndrome, like your Supergirls, syndrome here.
Yeah, it's different. I guess different. They have different struggles, different pressures. Even I do feel like the gap is getting smaller between them because I feel like, I'm having really great conversations with boys sometimes too, and they need to talk about their feelings too. But I think a lot of it could go back to brain development. And the parts of the brain, boys and girls' brains are different, and girls do have a larger emotional processing and connectivity between the two brains, which means they are more social. They are wired to connect. They are wired to need each other. And that just means the stakes are high in terms of how they're fitting in, how they're conforming, how they're also being evaluated and judged by people. And those stakes are really high. If I want friends and I want to feel good and I want to belong, I conclude it's really simple. All I have to do is change. And so they do, and then they fit in, and then that need is met. And again, it's a great thing, and it's a survival strategy, and I understand it. But I always ask, at what cost? So now she's pretending, she's a persona, she's performing. But I think, again, this is why her anxiety goes up, because she knows she's not being real. And she's not safe to be free, to be her true self, her weird self, her unique self, to have an opinion, to have a feeling, an idea that's maybe different from the group. I think that causes a lot of internal pressure as well as that external pressure that we see.
Yeah. I like how you highlighted talking about the brains a little bit different. We've interviewed Michael Gurian a couple times to talk on this podcast to talk about this actually. And it's interesting that boys are more wired for competition. They're more wired they'll stand out, and it's okay for them to stand out. This does not seem to bother them. Whereas a girl has a more pro-social brain and is more about egalitarianism and about social cohesion, that boys are less likely to be wired to go that direction. Does that make sense? They're more likely want to make everyone happy and to appease and to just keep the peace. And part of that is if we stand out too much, we don't fit in with the crowd.
Yeah, this is where it hits an interesting point, and I talk about this in the book too, is girls get this great message of be confident. It's a beautiful message. We want our girls to be strong and powerful, but I think the caveat is not too confident.
Right. And
because if I'm confident, heaven forbid, I feel good about my body, and I come to my group of friends and say, oh, I feel great. Don't I look good? I had such a good morning so far. I feel amazing. And then that means you could activate or trigger some other girl's insecurity, and she's not going to be happy with you. So they have this balancing act of, yes, they want to feel good, and they want to share things, but they also have a pretty strong filter. I can't be too confident. That might be perceived as conceited or boastful. And I don't want to make anyone feel bad about themselves. So they actually learn the language through their social interactions of being less confident.
Yeah, there's to toe the line a little bit.
That's an easier connector, like just, I don't feel so good, or do I look fat, or I bet you I failed that test. That's the language that girls are speaking. That's their conversation because they don't want to outshine anybody. They don't want to make anyone else feel bad. So it's like a beautiful intention. But again, it's at the cost of her own self-esteem and sense of self and self-worth. That's the problem.
And it's also how society expects women to act too. Like you can't be, girls are allowed to be sensitive to a degree, but if we're too expressive, then we're dramatic, right? If we dress a certain way, we're pretty, we're cute, but if we go a little too far this way, we might use some words we're not going to use on this podcast. Like it would then sexualize them, that they're asking for sexual attention. Like it's almost like you can't win if you set a boundary. You're a B word. But but they want us to set limits. So it's like, well, we're supposed to be confident, but if we go too far, then we're considered over the top and too masculine. Then it's like and
it's confusing. Like I get confused myself, and I've been on this earth long enough, and I think, I'm pulled in every direction. And so just to give anyone listening maybe just some hope and like a really practical tool, I think it's too much when we think about girls in this world, girls at school, girls in their sports teams. So I like to bring everything back to the house. And so the conversations and connections you have with your daughter are profoundly important. Like I can't emphasize that enough. And if you can have conversations about her whole self, so her confident self and her insecure self, her ambitious self and her lazy self, if you sort of create this imaginary circle and she's allowed to show up as her true self, everything in that circle is good and pure and to be validated and encouraged because it's allowing her to feel your unconditional love and support, which transfers or translates into how she feels about herself. So if we can bring everything back to like a very small circle in the home where she's safe and she's loved and she's validated and valued, I think if we can have conversations where we give girls permission to be their true selves, it's such a great starting point. She does have to learn to navigate her social groups and then school and careers and the world. I get that, but I like to bring it down to like a strong start. The relationship she has with you is important, and that is deeply connected to the relationship that she has with herself. If she hears you're worthy, I love you no matter what, that becomes her self-talk. I'm worthy, I'm lovable no matter what. I count, I belong. Like these are great messages. And again, I want girls to be able to have the safe space with us where they can be their true selves. And they lead to great conversations. Like if there's no judgment, you're just deeply curious. If you take away, the lessons, the lectures, the criticisms, the critiques, the feedback, whatever it is we want to call it, if you just lean in, we'll go with Sheryl Sandberg's title. If you just lean into the feeling, the experience, the part that she's showing you, her true self, and you just have genuine questions, wanting to know more about her and understand her, you're doing so many things. You're lowering her stress and anxiety. You're boosting her confidence and self-esteem. You're helping her connect with herself and with you. It is the best, kind of simplest thing that we can do for our girls.
Beautiful. I know clinically when I work with girls, and I love working with teenage girls, they're one of my favorite demographics. They're sort of creative and they're very intuitive and they're very in touch kind of with what's going on, with the pulse of what's going on inside of them most of the time. I love doing like almost like a mandala, like where they draw a circle and then I make the circle into puzzle pieces. And in each puzzle piece, they write a part of themselves. And after they're done, I have them, and I say the good, the bad, the ugly, even the dark and the light, put all the pieces in. And I even have them shaded in. So I understand if they perceive that as like a dark side or a light side. And just to get an idea, and I encourage parents to do this with your girls, like show all the different parts of themselves. And of course, we're going to talk about like how that's also a strength. They perceive it as negative, but how is that also a strength in others, while they may criticize it, find a way to flip it on its end. And then we're kind of normalizing that like we all have parts to ourselves. And sometimes those parts serve us and sometimes they don't serve us so well. but they're all a part of you. And then none of them are bad. They're there.
I love that. And I think I'm aligned with you in that sense. You can give me any quality, characteristic, choice, feeling, anything. And I always want to start with, wow, that shows that you appreciate this, or it shows that this is important to you, or it shows that you're really trying this. Like, you always want to start with the positive and the validating part. And then that can lead you to questions. Like, I'm really curious about this feeling, this way of being, this maybe darker side or poorer choice. And then it's usually flipping it to some sort of opposite. Like, let's say, for example, she lies, and you can say, like, what is it that it like is good in that? Because you would say, oh, that's a lie. It's like, oh, but she is trying to protect herself. She doesn't want to get in trouble. That's a great survival skill. So I know it sounds crazy, but I praise that. It's like, oh, that lie makes a lot of sense. You're so quick on your feet. Like, there's a lot to that. And it's understanding a little bit more about the situation and why she told that lie and what it is that she doesn't want to get in trouble for. There's always like a deeper reason, I guess, for behavior. And then flipping it and saying, okay, I understand that. Why don't we find some ways to lean into truth? Why don't we find some creative ways that you can still protect yourself, but we are now practicing truth telling and honesty? And then you flipped it. And that is so much better than saying, you lied? That's so disrespectful. Go to your room, you're grounded. That has got us nowhere and nothing. And I get it, because I do it too. It's like snap judgments and, you have your reactions. But I think if we can slow down and we can really like dig deep into the goodness of every single girl, well, every human, but there's something good. And there's always that beautiful starting point. And that leads you to much more meaningful conversations. And then, wow, she leaves the conversation not, oh my God, I'm such a bad person, I lied, but wow, I understand why I did that. And I see there might be a better way or a different way. I'm going to try. I'm going to experiment. Oh, and Mom and I just had a moment and we feel closer and connected because we have this really great conversation. Like, that's like my dream.
Well, and you said in here, girls don't need more pressure. They need more presence. And that's what you're offering in that moment, is to say, like, unconditionally, there is love here and there's acceptance. And I see the good in you, even though maybe that choice wasn't the best. Like, that wasn't a great choice to lie or steal or whatever they did. But ultimately, you see underneath there was a need that was trying to be met, whether that is feeling visible, feeling like safe with someone because they don't want to get in trouble. So they want safety, or they're looking for, maybe they stole something because like they wanted the newest thing because they're trying to fit in. They're looking for connection with their peer group. And underneath it is them seeking some sort of need that needs to be filled. But maybe how they went about it, we could go a different way.
Yeah, I like to say there's reasons for every behavior. You know this. So there's the under part as you speak. There's the deeper need for belonging or connection or acceptance or love or approval, whatever it is. And then there's the context. Like, I love to know more because I want to hear the story. Were you in a store with all your friends and it was like a dare or peer pressure? Like, if you understand all of the pieces, I think you really just understand her, which is what she wants. She just wants the understanding and closeness and connection.
What are maybe a couple other strategies our listeners could take home that like maybe are some of your favorite that you give moms that you work with or dads that have girls at home, caregivers, whoever, to like help build healthy self-confidence? Does that make sense? So they're not striving for perfectionism. There's healthy striving, I think, but understanding like they can't be everything to everyone. You can't be perfect all the time. So we talked about maybe piecework, like talking about intention, being present. What are maybe a couple other strategies that you love?
Can I split that into two? So can we talk really quick about confidence and then perfectionism? Okay, so for confidence, I think I'm just really excited about starting with the positive. So I feel like we always want to give girls credit where credit is due. So you give me any girl and I will be able to have a conversation with her and help her see that she's already confident. And what girls do is they tend to dismiss or minimize the things that they're already good at. And confidence could be from the inside. It could be her values, her qualities, her personality traits. And it could be on the outside that she's really good at chores around the house, or she's good at making friends, or she's good on the soccer field. Doesn't matter. She's already good at a whole bunch of stuff. So give her credit. I'm really practical. I like to have jars of pieces of paper and get girls to write down where they're confident, and you put it in the jar so she has the physical representation that she's already confident. And then I like to add or build on that. And I think the best way to build confidence is to teach girls the courage to try and the courage to do hard things. Because anything that's hard for her and it's specific to her is a bit of a process of being afraid, breaking it down into steps, being uncomfortable, working through some anxieties, coming out on the other side and realizing, wow, that was hard and I did it. I can do hard things. That's the takeaway message. So I think that that's a really practical way to build confidence. You start with where she's at and then you start to do the build. And they need to experience it for themselves. It doesn't work to just say, oh, you're confident in all sports, just go try a sport. It's like, no, she has to go through the experience and then have us validate it and then have conversations about how that felt to her. And then she's on her way. She will try more and more hard things and just keep getting stronger. Perfectionism is a trickier one, I think, because it's pretty prevalent and it's, again, high stress, high anxiety, but it's actually a similar pattern. I start with the good. I validate perfectionism, and I know that sounds weird, but if you talk to any girl about perfectionism, you can give her a lot of credit for trying, for having a high standard, for wanting the best. So I start with the positive there too. And I'm always really curious about why they want to be perfect. I think we can unpack some reasons. So sometimes they want to be perfect because it is just personal best. I know I can do better, so I'm pushing myself. Sometimes perfectionism comes from being perfect like her friends. So there's that peer pressure to keep up. Sometimes perfectionism comes from the house. So she feels that we will only love her if she is perfect and it's connected to something more. So I'm really curious about the why and her specific why. And then I tend to redirect girls to what's called perfectly imperfect. So they can be perfect, say, in their schoolwork, their school project, no problem. We can have conversations around that. But I need to give her a counter example or opportunity to be less than perfect. So you can be this way, this perfectionism can be with you for schooling, that's fine. But let's go to the kitchen and bake cookies and like have them be messy and come out as they come out. Like we need to find more things, more activities, more opportunities for girls to try things where they are low stakes, where they need to be messy and free and crazy and wild and have no stress, no pressure. We're doing it for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of the outcome. And I think that's a great thing that parents can do with their kids, because you both could probably find something that you've never done before and it's permission to just like jump in and do it. And there's no goal. That is not the point. It's about the joy and the journey and the fun. And I think that when girls start to see the difference, so here at school, I'm focusing on my perfect grades or whatever. That's hard and that's heavy and that causes me stress. Now I have this example of being with mom at a dance class where neither of us have done hip hop and we both suck and we're laughing the whole time. And there's no stress and no pressure. I think I want more of that. So how do I then maybe change some of my perfectionistic tendencies with my schoolwork to find a bit more balance so it feels like that fun that I have in this other part of my life? It's like a slow process, right? But it's a beautiful transition to start to lighten her load and the pressure she feels to be perfect in some way by introducing her to a new way of being and a new way of feeling that she can then start to like slide into the other parts of her life where it's more high pressure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know when I think of like perfectionism myself, I think of like Brene Brown's work a little bit. Like it's a defensive, it's based in shame, that like it's a belief that if we do things perfectly and we look perfect and we act perfect, we can minimize or avoid pain, blame, judgment, and shame. So at the end of the day, we've got a kiddo that feels maybe sometimes that something's wrong with her. Like at the end of the day, like there's something defective. And if I'm perfect, then people won't see that. They won't see that I'm falling apart in some way. So I always like think with kiddos who are really perfectionistic as being like, I wonder a little bit underneath it if there's something that feels a little broken here. Like we feel like I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. Like, and perfectionism is a way to like, to hide that, to shield that, to be like, I don't want you to see that parts of me that don't feel good enough. So I think when we can be vulnerable, like you're saying, be vulnerable with our kids and say, guess what? Like, I'm not perfect either. And we can be silly and we can make mistakes and it's okay. You're still loved, even when you're doing X, Y, and Z.
It's so true. And I think you can trace most behaviors to some deep wound, like a worthiness wound, a belonging wound, whatever it is. And it's like just doing the fun thing might also be that opportunity to be like, hey, I love you no matter what. And you're worthy just because. And you could have some great conversations about, again, her authentic self, her true self that's worthy just because she was born. That's all she had to do. She doesn't have to do anything.
I had that conversation with my son for the first time. Now, this isn't about girls. It's my 8-year-old son. We're sitting in bed and he's confident. Like, he's a pretty confident kid. And I don't know how we got on this train of sitting there talking about, I would love you even if you weren't these things. And he's like, wait, like literally a light bulb went off of his head. And I'm like, he's 8 and he's never figured this out. I was like, buddy, you don't have to be good at soccer. You don't have to be good at school. You don't have to be kind. Like, these are wonderful attributes that you have. Absolutely. And I adore you for these attributes. But you came into this world with no conditions. I would have loved you regardless if you didn't show up as kind. And he looked at me, he's like, so even if I was mean to my friends, you would still love me. And I'm like, yes. Would I be happy you made those choices? No, but I would love you regardless. Well, what? And he came up with all of these, like, what if I did this? And I'm like, no, like, you were loved regardless of, you could sit there on the floor and do nothing and be a ball of a mess, like a puddle. And I would still love you. And I'm like, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I better make sure to check in with these conversations more.
Make sure the other kids know this.
We think we're conveying this, but sometimes you have to be really forthcoming and be very directive. And I thought it was explicit. Apparently it wasn't. So we had to have that whole conversation.
Which makes sense. It's how, like, we live in a society that's very focused on productivity and performance. So it makes sense that they would connect the dots and be like, oh, okay, so when I perform and when I produce, I'm worth something. It's like, no, that's not true at all, but it's the world we live in. So it makes sense that was the messaging that was louder and stronger and got the attention of your son. And you're like, wait, no. You didn't get the first memo.
Yeah, you got the second one, which are like, here's the things I love about you, which my kids hear. But I think the first memo was like, but the love that exists is not contingent on those qualities. And so I'm like letting all the parents know that sometimes even when you do a great job, like kids you need to like backpedal a bit and say, however, love pre-existed those attributes that you had. Like, so Lindsay, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. It was absolutely wonderful. She's got some great books, guys. Like, I will put her newest one. The link is in the podcast description of the episode. And then, of course, when you go to her website, you'll see her other books as well. I think they're on Amazon. When we had you at our summit, I bought your book on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Audible, bookstores, and then through my website too.
Absolutely. But you'll be able to see all of those when you go to her website to purchase Supergirl's book that I just finished the other day. It was excellent. So thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thank you.